Welcome to this explainer. You know, when most people hear the phrase defensive football, what immediately pops into their head? They usually picture a team just parking the bus, right? Passively absorbing pressure, barely hanging on by a thread, and desperately praying for a 0-0 draw. But what if I told you that true defensive football isn't about just surviving at all? Actually, it's about setting a deadly, thrilling trap. Today, we're going to entirely reclaim the art of defending. We're going to see how giving up the ball is, quite often, the most proactive, calculated weapon a team can possibly wield.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Just think about this paradox for a second. In 2018, the French national team literally conquered the globe, winning the World Cup. Yet they held the ball less than half the time. They ranked 20th out of 32 teams in average possession. Now, how is that even possible in an era where dominating the ball was supposedly the only guaranteed way to win? Well, the answer lies in a really rich tactical lineage that treats the defensive phase not as the end of a play, but as the explosive, totally deliberate beginning of an attack. And to really understand this, we have to go back to the absolute foundation, catenaccio. Translated from Italian, it literally means the doorbolt. Now, this term has historically been thrown around as a total insult, like a synonym for anti-football, but that is a massive misunderstanding. Catenaccio implies a highly organized backline, sure, but its core philosophy is equally focused on what happens the millisecond that door bolts shut. It's about nullifying the opponent's attacks so you can immediately spring a rapid, devastating counterstrike.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the birth of Catenaccio, then look at Mourinho's Inter Milan Masterclass. After that, we'll break down Simeone's calculated low block, examine France's 2018 tactical blueprint, and finish up with mastering the counterattack.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the birth of Catenaccio.
This concept didn't just appear out of thin air. It actually started way back in the 1930s with an Austrian coach named Karl Rappin. He invented a system called the verrou, which is French for doorbell, using a sweeper positioned just behind the main defensive line to, well, sweep up loose balls. By the 1940s, coaches in Italy like Ottavio Barbieri were adapting this into what they called the half system, which introduced that sweeper role to Italian football. But the system didn't truly reach its legendary golden era until the 1960s with Helenio Herrera at Inter Milan.
And here's the crazy part. Before he died, Herrera was actually incredibly frustrated by people copying his defensive structure, but completely forgetting the attack. He famously said, "They forgot the attacking principles. I had Facchetti, the first fullback to score as many goals as a forward." His Grande Inter side was absolutely lethal. Yes, they had a rock-solid defensive lock, but they were renowned for sudden, lightning-fast counterattacks using overlapping, super-aggressive fullbacks. The defense was literally just the launch pad.
Moving on to Section 2, Mourinho's Inter Milan Masterclass.
Fast forward to the 2010 Champions League semifinal, which perfectly illustrates this whole paradox. We have Inter Milan going up against Pep Guardiola's legendary Barcelona. Inter had 30% possession. Barcelona had 70%. If you just looked at those stats in a vacuum, you'd think Inter was getting absolutely battered, right? But as Mourinho himself pointed out later, Inter was totally, completely in control. They willingly let Barcelona move the ball without actually getting hurt, absorbing all that pressure with just unbelievable mental strength.
The absolute masterstroke here was how they neutralized Barcelona's ultimate weapon, Lionel Messi. Mourinho explained that the press started calling his tactic a gavia, which translates to a jail. They didn't use traditional man-to-man marking because, that just drags a defender way out of position. Instead, they built a positional jail. Players like Zanetti, Motta, and Cambiaso completely shared the responsibility. Whoever zone Messi drifted into, they locked him down, communicating constantly so that the defensive structure never, ever broke.
But here is where the trap actually snaps shut. Inter didn't just sit in this jail for 90 minutes, they had a specific trigger. They would let the ball go wide to Barcelona's highly attacking fullbacks, Maxwell and Dani Alves. And the exact moment Barcelona committed those players forward and lost the ball, boom, Inter struck. They attacked the massive spaces left behind by those fullbacks, sending 3, 4, or even 5 players, guys like Maicon, Sneijder, Eto'o, and Milito, just sprinting forward into wide-open grass. It was this vicious, hyper-calculated attacking transition.
All right, Section 3, Simeone's calculated low block.
Under Diego Simeone, the low block is explicitly used as an active attacking platform built on, honestly, pure geometric precision. Atletico forms a super compact 4-4-2 or 5-3-2. The absolute key here is the distance. We are talking a maximum of 8 to 10 meters between the defensive and midfield lines. That totally chokes the center of the pitch.
Plus, the defenders don't just stand around. They use very specific body angles to physically force the opposition to pass out wide toward the touchline. When the ball does go wide, the winger drops back, forming this completely impenetrable triangle with the fullback and midfielder to block any pass back inside. It's brilliant.
And just like Mourinho's Inter, Simeone relies on highly specific counter triggers. When do they actually pounce? Exactly when these three conditions are met. 1. The opponent plays right into that wide trap zone. 2. The receiver takes a heavy touch, or maybe they get caught with their back to the goal. 3. An opposing fullback vacates their space. The literal second one of these things happens, Atletico's nearest midfielder aggressively steps out, and they immediately fire a forward pass into the channel for a runner. The low block isn't the end of their defending, it's the exact beginning of their attack.
Let's look at Section 4, France's 2018 tactical blueprint.
So back to Didier Deschamps. He won a modern World Cup through brilliant, highly calculated asymmetry. Now, on paper, France played a standard 4-2-3-1, but when they actually had possession, it was totally lopsided. Deschamps used natural center backs, Lucas Hernandez and Benjamin Pavard, playing out in the fullback positions. When they pushed forward to attack, one would go, but the other would stay strictly back, maintaining a really stable three-man defense. This asymmetrical shape allowed their left-sided midfielder, Blaise Matuidi, to drift inside and act as a hybrid shuttler, which perfectly balanced the whole team.
Now, this tactical engine required some incredibly specific roles to function. And N'Golo Kanté was the lateral destroyer, just covering massive amounts of ground to break up play. Then you had Paul Pogba, a guy usually known for his attacking flair, who Deschamps somehow convinced to play as a deep positional screener. Once Pogba won the ball, he used his elite passing range to immediately launch the counter. And Matuidi, playing as that tactical winger, tucked inside to match up against opposing midfields. This completely freed up their creative stars like Griezmann and Mbappe to just roam around without any heavy defensive burden.
0. That is the total number of goals and the total number of shots on target that France's starting striker, Olivier Giroud, had in the entire 2018 World Cup. 0. Yet, he was absolutely the unsung tactical hero of this entire system. His job wasn't to score, it was to be a physical anchor. He wrestled with center backs, held up the ball under intense pressure, and dragged defenders around to create the space behind the line for Mbappe's blistering pace to exploit. Without Giroud doing all that dirty, selfless work inside the trap, the counterattack simply doesn't function.
Finally, Section 5, Mastering the Counterattack.
You know, even in the digital world, these tactics are incredibly effective. Take this super popular Football Manager 22 tactic that's inspired by the legendary Brian Clough. Gamers are using these exact principles to punch way above their weight class. You sit in a low block to soak up the pressure. Use asymmetry, so maybe you have an inside forward cutting in on the left and a standard winger staying out wide on the right. You deliberately invite the opponent forward, and the absolute moment they lose the ball, you use direct passing on the ground to just tear right through the spaces they foolishly left behind. It's all about structuring the chaos.
And out on the real-world training pitch, how do you actually build this trap? Coaches, including those running modern academies in places like India, use highly specific drills to teach this stuff. They run these intense 10v8 defensive wave drills. The focus is entirely on keeping that strict 8 to 10 meter compactness between the lines. They actively train defenders on their body shapes with show outside constraints, literally having players earn points for forcing attackers out toward the touchline. They practice that winger, fullback, midfielder triangle over and over until it just becomes pure muscle memory.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to remember this one absolutely crucial thing. Defense is not anti-football. Whether we're talking about Herrera's Inter in the 60s, Mourinho's absolute masterclass in 2010, Simeone's geometric Atletico Madrid, or Deschamps' World Cup winners, these are not teams that are simply trying to survive a match. They are executing a calculated, proactive, and frankly thrilling tactical art form. They are controlling the space rather than just controlling the ball.
Which leaves me with this final thought for you. The next time you're watching a match and you see a team willingly surrender 70% possession, drop down into a tight block, and invite the opponent forward, what are you going to see? Will you just see a team playing anti-football? Or will you see a tactical masterclass patiently waiting for the trap to spring? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep your eyes on the tactics out there, and I'll catch you next time.